Good morning, I am live. It is Tuesday the 21st of May and I'm reading The Laird and the Lady. I'm in the second part of this book now. This is a book by Joan Marshall Grant. It is a novel, a fiction, because she wrote otherwise books about her previous incarnation. She passed away 1989. This is now about Marylda and Rowan. They are now in the Highlands, where Rowan lives in a castle, and Marylda met Georgina, his grandmother. Highland welcome. Marylda managed to fight off the depression that had settled down on her when she saw her room, until Rowan went to find Georgina. Then she unpacked, hoping that the sight of her own things on the dressing table would make it less hostile, that the cupboards, when full of her clothes, might have less suggestion of being the abode of skeletons. She tried to cheer herself by thinking how Grummy would have reacted to the bathroom. Would he have demanded sunny flush for the curious toilet that operated by pulling a lever through a secondary hole in the mahogany seat, or considered the entire decor worthy of a museum? The Victorians had a passion for mahogany. Even the bath was enclosed in this melancholy wood, which gave it an unfortunate resemblance to a coffin. However, she might as well be frank with herself, even though she could not afford this luxury in public. It was the welcome that had been the most bitter disappointment. What actually had she expected? She and Rowan would have arrived by car, a very old-fashioned open car that went at walking pace up the drive because a piper was playing them home. When they entered the courtyard, she would have seen the steps ranked with servants. The outdoor servants would have worn kilts, and there would be footmen in livery, green livery with yellow waistcoats. There would have been lots of maids, the older ones in black with high starched caps that had black ribbons hanging down the back, the others in print dresses well sprigged with mauve, and under their mob caps their faces would have shone with goodwill and soap. When she got out of the car, for some odd reason, she wore a long tussore coat with buttons from neck to ankle. A child ran forward to curtsy and present her with a bouquet of pink carnations. Georgina, a very different Georgina, was waiting by the open door. An old man was beside her, a very welcoming old man who was a relation. For a moment she thought he was her father-in-law, which was silly, for he had died when Rowan was born. She paused at the top of the steps, waiting to be carried over the threshold, and this was a ghastly mistake, for the custom wasn't known in Scotland. She wasn't quick enough to conceal how humiliated this made her feel, so she ran upstairs to take off her hat and veil. Now that's silly, she wouldn't be wearing a veil when she came back from her honeymoon. The contemplation of this other homecoming threatened to be even more depressing than the reality, so she forced herself to put it out of her mind. At least she needn't endure these hideous decorations a moment longer than it took her to find a way of telling Rowan that she could only too well afford to change them. It would be fun altering everything, much more fun than finding it already beautiful. If Cloud had been like the Chateau, there would be nothing for her to do, and if Rowan hadn't been poor, there would have been no point in her bringing money to him. She began to feel more cheerful, and even the wallpaper betraying by faded patches that Georgina had even removed the pictures, was no more than a trivial annoyance. She would have to tell Rowan soon, or else there would be no chance of installing central heating before the winter. But why worry about the winter when it was only the end of June? A clock tomed in black marble occupied the centre of the mantelpiece, above a grate whose precise paper and 3 lumps of dusty coal defied anyone to light them. The clock had stopped at 20 to 4, and the hand made a disapproving mouth that seemed to sneer under the keyhole eyes. "You'll dislike me even more when I've hidden you in the attic," said Marylda. "It would be cruelty to send you to a jumble sale, for someone might be rash enough to buy you." She tugged at the curtains, trying to draw them further back so as to let more sun into the room. The harsh serge with its bobble fringe reminded her of the sickening texture of woolen gloves which she had been made to wear as a child. She tugged harder, and the brass rings clattered angrily on the wooden pole, which had a gilt pineapple at each end. She looked at the bed and wondered if its curtains smelled as stuffy as they looked. Was the mattress straw or feather? Perhaps Georgina had thoughtfully added a couple of anti-personal mines. She took a running leap and landed on it, laughing for the first time since her arrival at Cloud. I've misjudged, dear Granny. No explosions, and it's not really all that uncomfortable. I wonder if she used to draw the curtains and play wigwams with Hector. Do they draw, or has no one been able to undo the cords which look strong enough to tie a victim to a stake? She lay back and contemplated the canopy. They must order serge by the mile. Shall I burn it or give it back to the family sheep so that they can live, that they can have little green coats to wear like Pekineses on Park Avenue after they've been shorn? Had anyone unpacked for Rowan, or was she expected to do it? She went through the bathroom, which communicated with his dressing room, and found that his suitcases had been taken away, and the contents neatly arranged in furniture which had been made at the same unfortunate period as that in the Laird's room. She presumed correctly that it had been chosen by Georgina's mother-in-law. How careful she would have to be not to do the wrong thing. For instance, before going out, Rowan had changed into a kilt, and when she had asked why he hadn't worn such a romantic costume in France, he had replied, rather coldly, that naturally no one who had the right to a tartan would wear it south of the border. He had then embarked on an elaborate explanation of the precise differences between the cadre and that of several clans which resembled it sufficiently closely for the uninitiated eye to be confused. It appeared that she was not the only one, that she was not only expected to remember that the cadre hunting, which they wore in the daytime, was predominantly green and blue with a scarlet line, but that the dress tartan, a much more colourful affair worn when less complex mortals were content with a dinner jacket, was apt to be confused with a Clooney MacPherson's, if one was sufficiently obtuse to ignore the subtle yellow line that further complicated the red and grey. Native wit saved her from telling him that, though the exact pattern seemed irrelevant, she was delighted that he wore what she considered a most becoming fancy dress. She had not bothered to open the curved door in the corner near the fireplace, for the wardrobe was so large that further hanging space was redundant. It now occurred to her that it might lead to a powder closet, but instead she saw a circular stone stair this got muted because the battery is empty. But why had the steps leading up to the room above been shut off? It had been done comparatively recently, for where the wallpaper had begun to peel, she could see the brickwork that was certainly not part of the original building. Against rats or less substantial tenants, she wondered, and tried to find the alternatives no more than interesting local colour. At the foot of the stairs, a posted door stood open to a wide apron of stone flags, etched by a balustrade. I think I continue that when I'm sure the battery is full. Sorry. So this was the chapter entitled Highland Welcome.